Good morning, and welcome back to another episode of Sunday Story. Now, so far we've looked at a lot of stories, and you might have met some new characters. My guess is you've probably met today's character before, and you probably know a little bit about his story already. That means you've got the chance today to listen along extra hard and see how this story points us to Jesus. Let's get into the story of the Forgiving Prince.
The Forgiving Prince. Jacob had 12 sons, but of all his sons, Joseph was his favourite. One day, Jacob gave Joseph a splendid new robe. It was beautiful and rich, with all the colours of the rainbow, but it made Joseph's brothers jealous. They wanted rich rainbow robes too.
To make matters worse, Joseph kept on having special dreams. I dreamt that I was the greatest. I was king, Joseph told his brothers, and you all bow down to me.
Now I'm sure you know, even if Joseph didn't, that telling your brothers things like that isn't a very good idea. Joseph's brothers hated him even more. They wanted to kill Joseph and his dreams.
And one day, that's exactly what they tried to do. They tore Joseph's rainbow robe off him and sold him to slave traders for 20 pieces of silver.
The traders took Joseph to Egypt and made him into a slave. The brothers went home and lied to their father, telling him that Joseph was dead.
That's the end of the dreamer, they thought. But they were wrong. God had a magnificent dream for Joseph's life, and even when it looked like everything had gone wrong, God would use it all to make the dream come true. God would use everything that had happened to Joseph to do something good.
Meanwhile, though, things were not looking good for Joseph in Egypt. He was far from his home and from his dad. Then he got blamed for something he didn't do. And even though he had done nothing wrong, he was punished and thrown in jail. But God had not left Joseph.
One night, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had a scary dream about thin cows gobbling up fat cows. What on earth did it mean? He didn't know. But Joseph was a dream expert, so Pharaoh sent for him. It means a famine is coming, Joseph explained. There won't be enough food.
Pharaoh was so pleased with Joseph's skills that he immediately took Joseph out of jail and made him a prince.
Now back home, Joseph's brothers had run out of food and everyone was hungry. God's special family was in danger. If they didn't get food soon, they would starve to death. So Joseph's brothers travelled to Egypt to buy food.
They came and knelt before the new prince. His brothers didn't know that the prince was Joseph, but Joseph knew who they were. Joseph's dream, the one about his brothers bowing down to him, was coming true. "It's me!" Joseph cried. When they saw it was Joseph, his brothers were afraid. They had wronged Joseph. They had sinned, and they knew it. Now Joseph would certainly punish them.
But Joseph looked at his brothers, and his eyes filled with tears. Even though his brothers had hurt him, and hated him, and wanted him dead, in spite of everything, he couldn't stop loving them.
His heart, which they had broken, filled up with love, and Joseph forgave them. Joseph threw his arms around them. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Behind what you were doing, underneath everything that was happening, God was doing something good. God was making everything right again." Joseph didn't punish them. He rescued them. He brought God's special family to live safely with him in Egypt.
One day, God would send another prince, a young prince whose heart would break, like Joseph. He would leave his home and his father. His brothers would hate him and want him dead. He would be sold for pieces of silver. He would be punished even though he had done nothing wrong.
But God would use everything that happened to this young prince, even the bad things, to do something good, to forgive the sins of the world.
It's craft time. Why don't you make a colourful paper chain? I've used different coloured paper, but if you haven't got different coloured paper, you could colour them in, paint them in, use felt pens, and then cut them into strips, put some glue on the end and tie them together. I've chosen to write a verse on my paper chain. I've chosen Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. You could look that up. Or you could choose to write Romans 8:28. Both verses help us understand the story today. Have fun.
Okay, well that's another week of Sunday Story in the can. You've got your craft. Remember the story of Joseph and his brothers. And if you enjoy making your hoops, then please do send in a picture. You might get featured on next week's video like these lucky kids. Okay, now off we go.